All right, man, peace. So, brother, this is going to be volume 1 in a new series that I'm going to be starting called Have Goals. And the reason why I want to start a series by that title is because it's extremely important that we set, certain markers for ourselves over the course of our lives, certain targets that we want to achieve and hopefully hit the bullseye on. When it comes to aspirations, we have to live our lives aspirationally. We have to inspire ourselves and live our lives aspirationally, because what happens is that when we don't do that, we fall into the self-victimization mentality that we see is so pervasive amongst the quote-unquote liberal blacks, or the wokeities as I call them. People who want to blame everyone else in life for their shortcomings. And what happens after you do that is that you become very frustrated with life, and you start to look to other people to take your frustrations out on. That's when you see cats out in the middle of the street shooting at each other, trying to rob banks, trying to carjack, because they take on this element or this air of entitlement, because they never lived their lives aspirationally. They never thought about tomorrow. They never thought about how they see themselves or what they see themselves becoming, as opposed to how they look at themselves right now. Right now is something that really, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't matter. All that matters is what you aspire to be. And when you have no aspirations, you become nothing, because your thoughts are going to determine who you are and what you're going to become. So if we have no goals, eventually we become idle. And when we're idle, meaning we have nowhere to go and no plan, no forward thinking, the Most High will give us something to occupy our minds in the form of allowing the angels on the left-hand side to give us certain thoughts or certain temptations that we're going to fall victim to or fall prey to. That's why the scriptures tell us, man, it's a fearsome thing to fall into the hands of the living God. Not only in the form of judgment, but also due to idleness. We have to constantly keep our minds busy and our spirits focused on what we want to do, what we want to become. Because if not, I promise you, you're going to end up one of those dudes who started off a relatively good person in prison for something stupid that you never should have gotten caught up in. When you're not goal-oriented or aspirational, you start to seek out other people who are idle, and a group of idle people become known as a gang. That's why I have a series called Who Are the Real Coons? A lot of these brothers who are in these gangs, they just had nothing else better to do. Next thing you know, they're doing 25 to life, or they're going to the electric chair. Many times throwing away a great deal of potential. Basically, all potential is the difference between actuality as opposed to what your ceiling could have been had you actually had goals. That's why it's so important to have goals every day. Why am I bringing this up? Because of a defensive back with the New Orleans Saints by the name of Marshon Lattimore, who was caught with an illegal gun. Now, if I remember correctly, this is the guy who has the rivalry with the wide receiver from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Mike Evans. They're always going back and forth, if I'm remembering him appropriately, and that's the same dude. Well, unfortunately for him, even though he's a great cornerback, he was caught with an illegal handgun. Now, why would that be? That he'd be a person making 7-8 figures a year, and yet he's driving around with an illegal handgun. Now, some of you brothers who are from certain environments like I am, you know that when people are driving around or walking around with an illegal gun, it's normally because they have beef with someone, or they're a member of a street organization and it's their job to put in work. A lot of these cats in the NFL and in the NBA, they can't let the street life go. Many times because that's a part of the culture that they were raised up in, and many of them are being extorted. Many of them have a file, just like you have politicians who have a file. And, their particular political party can open the file, or the mainstream media can open the file whenever they want. Or you have celebrities in the sports world like a Deshaun Watson who has a file that his organization can open. Some of these athletes, they have files that their clique or their gang can open up at any time, or at any point, to embarrass them or shame them. So now they're beholden unto that gang for things that they did back when they were 13, 14 years old. Some of these cats in these top sports leagues, they got bodies on them, and nobody knows about it. Nobody will ever know, as long as they keep doing what their gang tells them to do. So could that be the case with Marshon Lattimore? Who knows? So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
It's Friday, everybody. Happy Friday. Not a happy Friday for Marshon Lattimore, though. One of the top defensive backs in the NFL. Take a look at him. This was the mugshot that he posed for early Friday morning when he was arrested in Ohio. And according to police, It's not a good situation for one of the league's top defensive backs. This is a guy who made the Pro Bowl 3 out of the last 4 years. He was the NFL's Defensive Rookie of the Year in 2017, and he's entering the final year of his rookie contract. And right now, timing couldn't be worse for him to be arrested. But cops say they pulled over a car he was in late Thursday night, and when they pulled the car over, they said that he was in possession of a firearm that was loaded and later found to be stolen. That's what cops are saying. That's the allegations against Marshon Lattimore.
Now, brothers, once again, for those of you out there who are from certain environments, you know that when cats are rolling around with stolen guns, it's normally because they don't want to be traced or tracked when it comes to what they plan on doing with that stolen gun. They're not just rolling around with a stolen gun for no reason. And that's a dude from around the way, from around the corner, who's broke and whose job it is to be an enforcer or to put in work for his clique or what have you. So for this cat right here, who's said to make major money as a top NFL player, to be rolling around with an unregistered gun, a stolen gun, a quote-unquote black market gun, why would he be doing that when he's a known entity? Unless he's living a double life. Maybe he was about to put in work on somebody. Who knows?
Was arrested. He was booked. You can see him. At least he's wearing his COVID mask, so there's a positive, I guess. But guys, the bigger story here is that, and I know these are only allegations and he hasn't been convicted of anything, and hopefully he's got money to pay for a good lawyer, but the timing could not be worse. He's still in his rookie contract, which is a 4-year, $15 million deal with the Saints, but the top defensive back in the league, top paid defensive back, Jalen Ramsey, is in the middle of a 5-year, $105 million contract.
Let me say this very quickly. A 4-year deal worth $15 million sounds like a lot, but once again, you have to take off half off top for taxes. So he's making, somewhere around or akin to $2 million per year, a little bit less than $2 million per year. But who knows who is extorting him from around the way? So by the time he's paying his agent, his manager, he has his family expenses, and then he might have the clique that's extorting him. That could explain why he's, rolling around the block, riding dirty. I wonder if he was playing chameleon there when he got pulled over. Who the hell knows? But there's a lot more going on here, I suspect, than meets the eye. It's not just a dude that happened to get caught with an illegal weapon, in my view.
So he's looking at a massive payday.
Now, we also see that they're highlighting the fact that he wears the number 23. So could he be a Monarch athlete being put through some type of ritual? Who knows? But for the sake of this video, we're just going to address it from the two-dimensional perspective.
Gotta wonder if this arrest is going to mess with his money.
Yeah,
that's my first question. But I just don't get it, because if I was on the cusp of signing a major deal, and usually your first deal out of your rookie contract, athletes know that's like, if you're doing well, that's your big deal. Like, you know that I'm going from my rookie salary to like I'm gonna have a big jump. I would be locked up in the house. Like, I'm not going nowhere. I'm not messing up. I'm training all day. Like, that's just where my head would be, knowing that another guy just got 5 years, $105 million.
Right, but that's because you have sense. He might not have any common sense. He might not have an overall comprehension of self-preservation. A lot of people don't. A lot of people have this daredevil gene within their chromosomal structure where they just are always trying to put themselves out there on Front Street to prove to someone or some people that they're quote-unquote bad about it, or they're going to be the first one leading the charge when it's time to put in work. Who knows? If you really want to be a success in life, I always tell you, brothers, this: there has to be a certain aspect of you or a component of you that is an isolationist. All great men have an aspect of themselves that are isolationists. Even those great men or those notable figures in history that are perceived to be extroverted or outgoing. Muhammad Ali, who many people associate with one of the more outgoing and extroverted personality types ever. He had a training camp built in the middle of the woods where nobody could reach him other than his family and his fellow camp members. And he had a big log cabin all to himself, separated from everyone else, where he would just sit there in a rocking chair and write poems all day. I mean, that's what he would do, and poetry as well. I separate poems from poetry because his poems are more, his attempt to rank on the other fighters, or, something that had a jocular tone to it. He also has serious poetry that he wrote. Ali wrote some poems that really will blow your mind if you listen to him. He wrote one on the the Attica prison riot that's out of this world. But just getting back to the point, if you want to be a success in life, you have to know how to accept isolation for a certain period of time while you get yourself together. Even in the scriptures, a lot of the biblical scholars talk about how there's a gap missing in Christ's life between the age of 12 and 30. That's because that is when Christ was preparing himself for his ministry in various ways, spiritually as well as scholastically. He was preparing himself for what he had to do. Anytime you want to ascend to the highest version of yourself or the optimal version of yourself, you have to be willing to isolate yourself. Top boxers, what do? They isolate themselves when they're preparing for a high-level matchup. Marvin Hagler, Mike Tyson, Muhammad Ali, Ray Leonard, Ray Robinson, Floyd Mayweather. They will all go off to their little enclave and prepare. You have to accept that and embrace that. If you're too much of a people person, it's going to take away from you becoming or you being able to express that potential that everyone notices about you.
Will be my goal. And so I feel like I know that people want to have fun and do different things, but on contract year, you got to tighten up. Like that's and yes, I'm glad he wore his mask because that's the first thing I noticed too, but tighten up.
Yeah, I got to be honest. So look, you should not have stolen guns because stolen guns are bad. Stolen guns are like diverted to like the underground market and crimes happen. So stolen.
Now you heard what Babcock said. In other words, I think that Babcock is noticing some of the same things that I stated. There's something fishy about the fact that he had a stolen gun. You have all this money, but you're running around with a stolen gun. Once again, there are a lot of dudes out here in the NFL and the NBA in the sports world period who are living double lives.
Bad, but I do understand athletes wanting to protect themselves. I always think back to 2007 burglary, Sean Taylor, another NFL star, a defensive back who ends up murdered. Athletes are at risk, and there are jealous people out there who don't like to see people who are about to make something like $100 million.
Say it again, sir. There are a lot of jealous people out here in this world period. As the scriptures tell us, wrath is cruel and anger is outrageous, but who can stand before envy? I believe that's Proverbs 27:4. Envy is the only emotion that people will not acknowledge or admit to. They'll try to cover it with fake rationalization and fake righteousness, claiming that they're attacking someone or trying to attack someone because of a simple observation about what they think that person is doing wrong, when in reality they're upset that they cannot control that person and they cannot be that person. So always check the envy within you. If you're envious, it's because you're spending more time concerned about someone else than about yourself. If you're a real go-getter, you literally don't have time to be envious of someone else. You don't have the time. Most of the time, you're not even conscious of what someone else is doing if you're truly in your bag.
They are targets, and I do understand wanting to protect yourself. I do not understand having a stolen gun. You have to go about it the right way, get the license, make sure.
I do want to jump in and say these are just allegations right now.
Allegations.
Well, I was going to.
Well, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt because, as Evan Rosenblum states, these are just quote-unquote allegations. But where there's smoke, there's fire. So we'll see.
To Babcock's point, though, and I have been preaching this since I sat down here, where is your team? Like, I shouldn't have...
Maybe he has a team, but it's just the wrong type of team.
Myself personally, like I don't. So even if there was going to be somebody that had a gun for protection, like $15 million, I think is enough to have security detail. Like you can even have one of your boys be detailed if you.
Well, here's part of the problem, and I say this repeatedly. People just hear that figure. The media puts out these exorbitant figures about how much money an athlete is making, but they're not considering the expenses, the expenditures. Once again, it's not 15 mil. It's more like 7.5 mil over 4 years. And when you consider him paying for his own house, his car or cars, a house for his mother, helping out family members, possibly being extorted by many of the people that he grew up with, who knows how much money he actually has? Is he willing to spend that on security, especially when, as a top football player, he might think of that as emasculating or self-emasculating, that I need someone to protect me? A lot of this is ego-driven.
that to be the case, but you shouldn't be doing that.
You're a business when you're an athlete, right? You're making $105 million over 5 years. That's more money than most businesses make in 5 years. So you are, you should be surrounding yourself with advisors the same way that a CEO of a business would, and making sure that you don't misstep, because one false move and the money train comes to a screeching halt.
And that's why.
Now, all of that is true, but once again, is he able psychologically and or financially to separate himself from the people that he used to know? One of the key aspects of self-elevation is the understanding that you're going to have to separate from the people that you knew when you were the old you. Now, there may be people who can take that journey with you, but a lot of people, they have to be left behind because they're going to be concerned about maintaining the old you so that they can maintain the old rapport that they had with you. Most people can't grow with you because they're too small-minded and self-worshipful. That's why I tell brothers who come into the knowledge, 9 times out of 10, if you're with a so-called woman or your so-called girlfriend or what have you, 9 times out of 10, that relationship is not going to work. It's just not. Because she's going to say to herself, who is this new person? The dynamics are going to change, and it's going to be the same thing with your so-called friends, your so-called homeboys. And if they're not maturing in the same direction as you are, the relationship is not going to work. They might even become your enemies. Who knows?
That's why I don't know why agents aren't telling new age athletes this. I don't understand it. It's like somewhere along the lines that got lost. Like, you should never be taking the fall. And I know it sounds bad, but like, you should never be in a position to ever take a fall if you're the talent. That's crazy.
Well, that's the same thing that Chris Carter, the great former wide receiver of the Minnesota Vikings, is known for saying. You should never be the one taking the fall, especially if you're providing for a clique of dudes around you who many times themselves are not aspirational. At the very least, they can make themselves useful as, collateral damage or someone who's expendable, as long as they're being taken care of in whatever situation they end up in the process of them being the ones who take the fall. So everybody has a job to do and a role to play once you understand that you yourself are a corporation. You have employees. They're not really your friends anymore. They're employees if they continue to hang around you, particularly if you're the one bringing in all the money.
I hope for his case that this is a giant misunderstanding and the gun isn't really stolen, and that there's some kind of an explanation for this, because, by most...
Well, money talks. So it's not even necessarily going to be about whether or not they can prove that the gun wasn't stolen. It's just going to be about how much money they can throw at the judge. So we'll see.
I've heard good things about Marshon Lattimore through the years. He's a hard-working kid, came out of Ohio State. He was a star there in high school. He was one of the top defensive backs in the country. Yeah. He grew up in Cleveland. They know who he is there. He has a bright future ahead of him, and I hope that they're...
Please keep in mind that Cleveland has one of the higher crime rates in the country. Their crime rate is extremely high, especially in the so-called black communities there.
Explanation for this, and it doesn't, hopefully this doesn't mess his whole life and his whole career up, but it's a bad look right now.
It's a bad look, but gun possession of an illegal gun, that's not going to hurt his prospects, not with the level of talent that he displays. Now, if they're able to trace that gun or track that gun to a potential crime, even a murder per se, now that will have a trickle-down effect, obviously, on his career. But anyway, brothers, once again, have goals, man. Every day we have to write down goals or have goals that we want to achieve so that we make better decisions. Many times brothers end up killing someone because they were never goal-oriented, and they get so frustrated with life, they're just like, fuck this nigga, man. This nigga's trying to disrespect me, fuck him. Instead of saying, you know what, I'm just going to ignore this fucking clown because there are certain things that I want to get done with my life. But anyway, peace.